Right, good evening everyone. Welcome to this evening's Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting at Warwick District Council on Tuesday the 25th of November 2025. I'm Councillor Andrew Melton. I'm the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, and alongside me I have Darren Knight, Deputy Chief Executive, and Patricia Tuckwell, Civic and Committee Services Manager. Just to be aware as well that the meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel. So please be aware that this is part of our commitment to reducing the use of paper. Councillors and officers may be using electronic devices during the course of the meeting as well, so they're not keeping abreast with the football results or anything. They are actually, it is part of assisting us with our work. I'd also like to warmly welcome Councillor Alan Bode, Chair of our Planning Committee, who's attending for item 3, which is the five-year housing land supply. Welcome, Councillor Bode. There have also there's been quite a few pre-scrutiny questions. I hate to give my own group a pat on the back, but there are an awful lot from the Liberal Democrat group, and I don't think there were any from any other groups as well. So can I just remind all members, as I have done before, that the scrutiny process does start effectively the minute the Cabinet papers are released, and the more questions we can get in, the better, because it actually also helps us shape the agenda for this evening as well and make sure that we're focusing on the right things. So does anyone need I don't think we need the emergency procedure, so I'll dispense with that. Just a reminder, we use of mics. It almost feels a little adversarial this evening. We've got committee on one side and officers on the other side, but it should hopefully avoid us turning around and talking to people as well. So just remember speaking to the mic and trying to avoid putting anything in front of it. So item 1, apologies and substitutes then. I have Councillor Kennedy substituting for Councillor Harrison. Welcome, Councillor Kennedy. And do we have any other apologies? Don't think we do, that's good. Do we have any declarations of interest on items? Members, no, that's fine. Right, okay, so we're going to move then straight into item 3, which is the five-year housing land supply. Now, this is a report that actually this committee requested a couple of months ago to provide more information relating to our current situation in respect of our housing land supply. So the council currently doesn't have a 5-year supply of housing land, and this is relevant because it impacts on how the council could and should consider certain planning applications which will come before it. The matter will also have workload, financial and potentially reputational issues for the council. So I'd like to thank Mr. Clark, Mr. Fisher and Mr. Cornfoot for their work on the report before this. Can I ask one of you to just give us a very brief reminder and overview of the report? Assume that members have read it, but just to start us off, Mr. Clark, we'll come to you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I shudder to say this on an issue that's quite technical, but I hope the report's self-explanatory. By all means, either now or at any time, come back and ask myself, Andrew or Gary, any questions, because it is an important matter for the council to consider. I won't go through the report, but just wanted to make a few key points. The first is, as I say, we do, and as the Chair said, we do not currently have a 5-year housing land supply. Our figure is currently 2.34 years supply. And in order to get back to a 5-year housing land supply position, we would need to provide a little short of 3,000 additional dwellings to be built in the 5-year period. Now, of course, any 5-year supply position is recalculated annually when you do your monitoring. This is currently based on the 2024 monitoring. We haven't quite completed the 2025 monitoring for reasons which are in the report, so we will need to update the figure shortly. But I can assure you it's not going to change in a significant way to impact what we're going to be talking about today. Second point to say is that, as the report goes at some length to describe, there are a variety of reasons why you have a 5-year, you may not have a 5-year land supply. It's very rarely down to a single issue. And although some of those are within the council's control, many of them are not, and some indeed are national and indeed global factors. The pandemic, as you know, caused all building sites to be shut for, I think it was about a 3-month period, and that saw a slowdown in house building in the year 2021. That in turn had an impact on the amount we have to provide in subsequent years. Similarly, the cost of living crisis and all of the things that flow from that in terms of market confidence, developers' willingness to risk and to build homes, the availability of mortgages, people's willingness to buy homes, all of those sort of factors way outside our control will impact on the 5-year land supply. There are some over which we can exert some control, and obviously I set those out in the report. The next point to make is that we are not unusual in not having a 5-year land supply. At the moment, I think it's between half and 2/3 of planning authorities across the country are estimated to have it, including many of our neighbours, including Stratford upon Avon district, with whom, of course, we're doing our joint local plan. So we're not unusual in this situation. Neither is it the first time it's happened to us. I can't remember how many councillors may have a particularly long memory. Certainly Councillor Bode will, and some others. But about just over 10 years ago, we were in exactly this position before, where we didn't have a 5-year land supply, and that required us to go on to my next point, which is that, and my final point is to say that, as members of the Planning Committee will be aware, when you don't have a 5-year land supply, the basis upon which a local planning authority is expected to consider planning applications changes. Now, in a normal situation where we have a local plan, we would expect the local plan to be the starting point and, to a large extent, the finishing point of considering whether a planning application is likely to be suitable and therefore to be approved. When you don't have a 5-year land supply, national planning guidance and policy is very clear that there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and that means that sites that are out with the local plan need to be given a much more positive consideration than would be the case if we weren't in this situation. Again, we say a little more about this in the report, and members of the Planning Committee, and they'll know this because they've had applications before them already, they will receive detailed planning and legal advice at that time in relation to those specific applications. Suffice to say, it has and will continue, we expect, to lead to a significant rise in what we would otherwise call speculative planning applications which probably the applicant wouldn't even think about submitting if we had a 5-year land supply. Because we haven't, they have done, and as I say, there's been at least one or more applications before the Planning Committee, and there will be others that we're aware of. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, with my colleagues, we're very happy to take any questions and help in the discussion.
Great, thank you, Mr. Clark. So I'm going to hand over to members for any questions. We've got Councillor Kennedy first. One thing I would like to do, so just in reference to the paper, section 5 outlines a number of changes or proposed changes to improve performance. I would like to hear through the discussion members' views about those, and maybe some questions about the I guess the feasibility, the doability of those as well, and how robust those are. So that's just a little bit of direction for committee. So Councillor Kennedy will come to you first.
Thank you, Chair. And despite not being a Liberal Democrat, I did have a discussion with officers about this item before the meeting, and they said, bring your question to the meeting, and which I'm happy to do. I, first of all, would like to thank officers for producing a really helpful paper. As a member of the Planning Committee, I think this is extremely helpful to have all this background. My question focuses on Table 2 in the committee, and which is the list of some of the major sites in the current local plan which have encountered delays but are currently being progressed, and particularly site H43 Kings Hill, which was granted outline planning permission, I think, some years ago. I don't recall exactly on what date. And the fact that this site has not progressed, a site encompassing 2,350 houses, it appears this has had a huge impact on the fact that we have not got our 5-year housing land supply. So my question is, how much of the deficit in housing land is down to this one site not being progressed? And it seems to me, putting on a planning committee hat, that we've approved this and we're not holding it up or anything, and yet it's the developers who are not being through, and yet we're then being given the tilted balance for other planning applications, which in effect might not be so satisfactory. So we're required to approve perhaps less satisfactory sites because the good ones we have approved have not been brought through. So I'd be very interested to hear comments about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So when the current local plan was adopted, the council estimated that realistically 1,800 dwellings at Kings Hill could be delivered in the current local plan period. So the site has an estimated total capacity of 4,000 homes, but of the 4,000, it was estimated that 1,800 could be delivered in the current plan period. So if you take the figure that Mr. Clark gave before of just shy of 3,000 dwellings, so I think it's something like 2,900 dwellings is the deficit. Well, Kings Hill, you could say, takes up quite a significant proportion of that, in that those 1,800 dwellings haven't materialised to date. It is very challenging for us as the local planning authority, because there is only so much we can do to control and try and bring that site forward more quickly. Officers have been doing what they can, what they reasonably can, to try and encourage those in control of the site, so Lying Court, to bring that site forward. I think there's also a large proportion of the site owned by Coventry City Council, and they've not brought their element of the site to the market either yet. So our site delivery officers have been working with Lying Court and working with the county council and the city council, because the site is on the boundary of the Coventry City Council's administrative area and Warwick District Council, to try and overcome some of the issues. So there's quite a few technical matters around transport on highways there, which need to be overcome. We've also been working with MHCLG and Homes England to see what support they can offer us to try and bring the site forward. And so they are working with us and have successfully set up I'm not sure if a project board would necessarily be the right term, but a working group at the very least, involving the City Council, the County Council, ourselves and Lying Court, to try and identify what are the biggest challenges and barriers to the development coming forward, and how can they be overcome. In addition, we have agreed with MHCRG and Homes England £150,000 grant to help with some further master planning work, which is required as part of a couple of the planning conditions, and the the promoter hadn't done much, Lion Court hadn't done much to address those conditions to date. So we've kind of taken that upon ourselves to take the lead on that master plan to try and make it easier and clearer for house builders who may take on the site to know what is expected of them. So, sorry, long-winded answer, but the Kings Hill site is a major factor, but is certainly not the sole factor in us not having a 5-year housing land supply. But we are doing all we reasonably can as officers to try and bring that site forward.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And if I could just ask a more general supplementary question, then it seems from the paper that we are unlikely to achieve the 5-year housing land supply until the new local plan comes through. Would that be an appropriate assumption?
Yes, correct, yeah.
Can I just ask on that as well? Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. So just for all our understanding, does the new local plan effectively reset the counter? So the minute that comes in, we're then back to, right, we have a 5-year land supply because we've got the plan. Is that how it works?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. When the inspector for the new local plan examines the plan, they will be looking to see whether the council or councils in this case have a 5-year supply of deliverable sites. They won't find the plan to be sound unless we can demonstrate that at the point of adoption we will have a 5-year housing land supply. It's then we need to be careful with our choices around the sites that we include in the plan, because clearly we want to have a comfortable supply thereafter and not just supply on day one which could quickly fall off the cliff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cornford. Councillor Luckhurst.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry if this question is rather vague. So, assuming that the absence of the 5-year land supply means we may have to be more generous than we'd like with approving applications, how does that affect the conditions we can put on applications? So, if we kind of have to approve more housing, can we be quite strict with the conditions, or are we equally constrained on that front?
Through you, Chair, Councillor Lucas, thank you for that question. There are conditions that we can impose on planning permissions that we might be granting that, had we got a 5-year housing land supply, might not have necessarily the permission might not necessarily have been forthcoming. And conditions there are really around restricting the life of the planning application. So normally a planning application would have a life of 3 years. What that means is that work needs to commence on implementing that development within 3 years. So what we would be looking at potentially at doing for applications that were coming forward to address the lack of a 5-year housing land supply would be potentially to reduce that. And we have, I think, in one case, granted a planning permission where we've reduced that to 1 year from memory. And then associated with that, it would be quite reasonable for us as a local planning authority to add a condition requiring a delivery plan over and above what we might normally expect developers to provide. And that's really to for them to demonstrate the path, if you like, that will bring that development forward more quickly than might otherwise have been the case, which then would contribute to addressing the 5-year housing land supply that bit more quickly.
So using conditions to make an application slightly more palatable might be the route the planning committee could take rather than refusal. Is that right, I understand?
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't quite catch that. Could you repeat?
If rather than refusing applications, we can make it slightly less unpalatable, an application that we would maybe have refused in the past, we can use conditions to make it a bit more acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've heard reference to the tilted balance, which is essentially around scenarios where the principle of a development might be acceptable, where in normal circumstances that might not be the case. So it doesn't follow that planning committee have to grant planning permission for every single proposal that comes forward, because there's a range of detailed considerations that need to be taken into account as well, which might, in officers or indeed in planning committees' views, make a proposal unacceptable. But where we're looking at the overall principle, yes, you're absolutely right. There is an opportunity to grant planning permission with those additional conditions that might encourage that development, well, are designed to encourage that development to come forward more quickly.
Great, thank you, Councillor Lucas. Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'm sure Mr. Fisher will recall the weekly, or was it daily, emails he was giving me at the time after coming out of COVID to clear the backlog of planning applications at the time, because every resident was at home planning a wraparound or something, having now worked at home. And I'm delighted to see the performance actually in mass terms that was achieved there. So congratulations to you and your team. Chairman, for those that were around at the last local plan, we were, as Mr. Clark says, in the same place. And it does, I see 5.1, that the best remedy for resolving this problem is to have a new local plan. It was the same place back in 2015 or 16, and it was a political motivator to get councillors to support the new local plan, just to reassure the leader. The point, though, is here we are again, but now we're facing a South Warwickshire local plan that will run for potentially 25 years. What have we learnt? I mean, is this what happens? We're not even near the end of our plan period. We've still got some years to run in the current local plan. My question really is probably to Mr. Clark, if I may. Is this, in your experience, something that happens regularly? And if so, what can we be doing for the new South Warwickshire local plan to future-proof it so that we don't have 10 years, for example, without I know we update every 5 years and refresh, etc., but this seems like a systemic problem with the local planning process, that at the end of the plan, we end up hitting a 5-year housing land supply problem. Am I being too cynical? Sorry, Mr. Clark, I probably am.
No, I don't think you're being too cynical at all. It is I don't want to say a perennial problem for local planning authorities, but it is instructive that, you know, a significant number of English planning authorities are in the same position as we are. I think if there's any lessons to learn, and I am not saying this in any way to criticise the current local plan, but it just reaffirms the importance of having a range of sites in a range of sizes. You know, we have a focus in this local plan. I know we've said we want to look at maybe a smaller number of larger sites. I'm not saying that is wrong, but it must be balanced with a number of sites which can reasonably come forward in the shorter term. I think it also has to be accompanied, as I believe we're doing, and I know we're in this problem now, but by a commitment by the council to support the delivery of sites in a range of ways through what we're doing. You'll know that we have site delivery officers that we appoint within the planning service. They have proven over the recent years to be very popular, both with their colleagues and with councillors, because site delivery officers can straddle and I don't want to say divide, but you've got the planning policy side and Mr. Cornfoot developing the local plan, and you've got Mr. Fisher and the development management team pressing the planning applications, but actually bringing all that together, particularly where you've got larger sites, where you've got problems with infrastructure and complexities like that. The site delivery officers can help to do that. And indeed, there are other things that the council can do to help bring sites forward. So anything we can do around that is helpful. It has to be said, of course, that one of, as I say, many reasons why we don't have a 5-year land supply is our plan is over 5 years old, and as a result, we are required not just to look at the figures in the local plan itself for the number of houses that have to be built, but the figures that the government are telling us have to be built. And of course, as you'll know, we've got the new standard method, we've got a new set of ambitious housing figures, and we have to factor that into our calculations too. So all of that comes together. But I think, sorry, to cut through to the answer to your problem, to your question, Councillor Day, is it's about trying to do as much as we can to make sure we've got a balanced package of deliverable sites and then doing all we can to support their delivery.
Chair, I welcome those insights and I hope that will feed through into the work I know that's going on presently with the local plan. I also, during Bishop Satchbrook's build-out, had the site delivery officer on speed dial as a local councillor. They are a very, really valuable asset for any ward member that ends up having a big development in their ward, and we had an excellent site delivery officer at the time. Chairman, my point then is really around 5.3 in the report, and I'm just thinking as a way, you know, to move, to really demonstrate that we're moving ahead of the new local plan. The whole point around proposed changes to the scheme, the proposed national delegation, scheme of delegation, the prospect of us, could we, I mean, as an overview and scrutiny committee, really highlight that recommendation to Cabinet, because I think there's an opportunity for us to demonstrate that we're ahead of national government with this. And it is a partnership with our officers, and against, you know, we should be thinking about how we can delegate and enable our planning team to work as efficiently as possible. And I'm sure Councillor King would welcome that at Cabinet.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Day. What I will do, I think, as we wrap up the discussion, is come back to that idea about 5.3. So whilst it's not this isn't a Cabinet paper, we can still advise Cabinet of members' views on this as a particular proposal. I think that's a good call. So, Councillor Kohler, please.
Thank you. Just on 5.3, I confess, I mean, what 5.3 says is that to change the current scheme of delegation, and it says the proposed national scheme of delegation is likely to achieve this. Could officers just say 30 seconds worth on what that national scheme of delegation is?
Yes, although forgive me, I haven't got my fingers on the details of it. But earlier in the summer this year, the government announced a technical consultation on a proposals in relation to the operation of planning committees. There was an element around training. There was an element around the size of planning committees, but probably the one that excited the most interest, not just here, but locally, but nationally as well, was a proposal to significantly extend the scheme of delegation to officers. At the moment, all councils can set their own scheme of delegation and they all vary. Ours has evolved over many years and custom and practice at this council. The government are recommending or proposing a national scheme of delegation, and the impact of that, and again, I'm happy to send round the details of this and indeed the council's response, because we did make a response to this consultation. The proposal is to significantly extend the scheme of delegation nationally, so that actually the governments are saying that they want planning committees to focus on maybe the larger, certainly the more contentious and maybe policy important planning applications, and leaving officers to deal with a much wider range of more, I'll call them standard planning applications, but that is maybe regardless of the number of objections applications get, because at the moment, of course, the number of objections itself can trigger a report to go to planning committee. That's seen across the country as a whole, and the government is trying to move away from that.
Thank you, very helpful. Can I ask about the housing delivery test? So in 2.22, it makes it clear that there's what the housing delivery test is, and it sounds like we're likely to fall below 100%, and therefore the 20% buffer gets added to the 5-year land supply, effectively saying that the land supply needs to be 6 years worth over 5 years. Am I reading between the lines correctly, that we think that that's likely just to make it even more confirmed that the only way out of this is to get the South Warwickshire local plan adopted.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So the housing delivery test is an annual calculation from government measuring housing delivery. I say it's an annual calculation, but the last time it was published was well over a year ago, and we're not clear on when it will next be published. So previously we have had a score, every year it's been run, we've had a score over 100%, which is what you would want to see. My initial calculations would suggest that next time the government do run the housing delivery test, we will probably be below 100%, but above 85%. So I don't think the 20% buffer is likely to apply to us, certainly, you know, in the immediate future. What is likely is that there will be what's referred to as a consequence, and that consequence is likely to be that the council needs to produce a housing delivery action plan. So that is something that, as Mr. Clark mentioned before, the site delivery officers, that is something that myself and the site delivery officers have started to look at because of other priorities, the South Warwickshire local plan and other site delivery priorities, including some of the sites which are referred to in this report. We haven't been able to kind of progress that too far yet, but we've certainly been doing some work in the background thinking about the housing delivery action plan.
Thank you. If I may ask a follow-up question to the Kings Hill question that was raised earlier, which is that presumably that the site's still going to get brought forward, and a sizable proportion of it will be brought forward, you know, if the South Warwickshire local plan is adopted in, where are we, 2027, a sizable proportion of it will be brought forward in that plan's time period. So at the time that it's inspected, would that site, the houses that are, you know, projected to be brought forward from that site count towards our 5-year land supply at that time? Is that a clear question?
Yeah, yes, they would. So they'd be counted as a commitment because it's already got planning permission, and yes is the answer to your question.
And do they also count towards the total number of houses that we need to build in the new plan period?
Yes. So I mean, there's obviously not many benefits of the site having not come forward, but that is one of them, that it does reduce the number of new homes on new sites that we need to provide for.
Thank you. Yeah, silver linings. If I can, so Councillor Bode submitted some questions before scrutiny, which I think were they published on the website today? I think they were. Okay, good. So one of those questions was talking about if a site is brought, a speculative site is brought forward that's in the green belt currently. Could you just talk through a bit the answer that you gave there, Mr. Clark, and perhaps embellish on it a little bit?
Yes, I'm just trying to see. Yeah, it's yes. The question that Councillor Bode asked was, given that we have the tilted balance needing to be applied, would permission have to be granted on speculative applications on a site that is not under consideration, including those in the green belt, until the local plan is approved? And just briefly, the answer is the tilted balance would have to be applied to all applications, regardless of whether or not they're in the local plan, within the green belt, and we would advise planning committee accordingly on any of those. So the fact that a site is or isn't in the green belt, the fact that a site may or may not appear as one of our preferred options in the preferred option draft of the local plan that we produced earlier this year, is not relevant to whether we have to apply the tilted balance. Now, as I've said, each site is unique, and therefore the planning committee will be given specific both legal and planning guidance and advice on how to consider those applications. But the short answer is yes.
But just to be clear, it doesn't negate the fact that a site is in the green belt and the developer still has to justify it being taken out of the green belt. The tilted balance doesn't do that on its own. Is that correct?
We may want to check to give you a legal answer and maybe get a lawyer to help us, but basically an approval of a planning application on a site in the green belt at this current time, say because we're having to apply the tilted balance, the approval of that development would not of itself take the land out of the green belt, because the land can only be taken out of the green belt through the local plan process and through examination. Now, of course, you might say the impact is exactly the same as taking it out, but legally, technically, it's the local plan that would take the land out of the green belt. And the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, provides a framework by which you should consider such applications.
Okay, trying to process that. So I think what you're saying is that no, I don't, I'm not following what you're saying. So,
Do you want me to have a go?
yeah,
I
please
can
do,
make
Chair.
a stab, which might be wrong. So, in effect, are you saying that actually a site could still be built in the green belt, so we could still have houses being built there, but that land is actually still green belt land, even though it's got houses on it?
Yes, exactly. Thank you. I mean, I'll give you a comparison. It's not a particularly good comparison, but it may help. The Gigafactory planning application came forward out with the local plan. So obviously the Coventry Airport site is in the green belt. The planning application was for a Gigafactory. That planning application had to identify very special circumstances for land in the green belt. That planning application was approved, as we know. And although that could result in a big factory or big buildings being built on that site, that act of its own does not take the land out of the green belt, because the only place you can take land out of the green belt is through a local plan.
Thank you. That was a perfect example to help me understand. Thank you. Am I right then that an application coming forward speculatively in the green belt still has to show very special circumstances, or does the tilted balance take that away and they just have to show fairly special circumstances?
That's the one bit I would want a lawyer to help give you the best advice. There is reference in the NPPF about development in the green belt not being inappropriate development. And of course, that's the test that decides whether you need to apply very special circumstances. That is not inappropriate in a situation where you don't have a housing 5-year land supply. So the tilted balance will change the considerations which the planning committee and officers will need to give to a planning application for a proposal which is in the green belt. As I say, when we get to a situation of one of those coming before the planning committee, we will make sure you have all proper planning and legal advice. And as I know some councillors are aware, a developer has launched a consultation. Councillor Colo, I know you're aware of this, has launched this week their own public consultation on a major site in the green belts north of Leamington. And they have indicated an intention, and again, they've been public about that, to bring that forward as a planning application. And so, as and when that application, and indeed any other, came forward, we'll advise you in more detail on those matters.
I think it would be very helpful if it would be possible to bring forward that legal advice and share it with councillors and potentially do a quick briefing for councillors who are interested in it, just to make sure that we understand the position as comprehensively as possible, as soon as possible.
Sorry, through you, Chair, we're very happy to take that away. I've been talking to both Mr Fisher and Mr Cornwall, particularly Mr Fisher, about how we can best support the planning committee in the really difficult decisions they're having to make at this time and having to deal with some of these complexities, which I am struggling to give you clear answers to. And so maybe some form of member training and advice would be helpful, and we're certainly very happy to take that away.
Thank you very much, Mr Clark. One last point, if I may. In 2.33, there's another little table, Table 3, which lists current planning applications which are out with the current local plan and where the lack of a 5-year land supply is a significant factor. And the first of these was land south of Westwood Heath Road, where the application, I believe, was refused, and having looked up the application, officers had recommended approval. So do we think that, I don't know whether you want to comment on that application specifically or more theoretically, in terms of, are we lining ourselves up trouble in terms of the likelihood of appeals, and if appeals are granted, costs being awarded? And is that an example of another action that we need to do, which is further training for the planning committee and substitutes on the tilted balance?
Chair, through you, following that decision made by planning committee a couple of weeks ago, we have, or are in the process of taking legal advice as to the, if you like, the strength of that reason for refusal and the likelihood of the council being able to defend that decision. The advice that we've had is that it's very likely that that appeal will be allowed, and there's a strong likelihood that costs will be awarded against the council should there be an appeal, which we're led to believe by the applicant that there will be. So that was a particular decision made by the planning committee, quite legitimately, and concerns were raised there. I think in terms of the second part of your question around training for planning committee members particularly, but for members more generally, yes, that is absolutely something that we need to really sort of focus on. But having said that, the nature of the planning system as it operates at the moment is that these more difficult, these more complex, more sensitive planning applications do come to planning committee, and that's usually because there are a whole different range of considerations that need to be taken into account. And finding the right balance is it's not a science, it's something that is very, very difficult. But in terms of moving forward with training, given the situation that we find ourselves in, that's absolutely something we will be focusing on.
And if I may, does the whole situation that we're in here imply that we need to budget for increased legal costs in defending failed applications?
Sorry, Councillor Coder, can I just interrupt for one moment? We're getting into can I remind officers and members we are in public session, so anything that is shared this evening, so particularly legal advice to the council, is being broadcast on YouTube, and I'd probably ask officers to consider that. Maybe our Mr. Knight, our monitoring officer, to give us some advice, monitoring officer for this evening.
Can I just say, I'm not the monitoring officer, but
Nearest I've got.
Nearest you've got, yes, a poor substitute, I think. And I think, can I just urge caution regarding discussing legal advice in public domain? That would be for an exempt session if needed. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Kohler, did your question enable us an answer that doesn't involve giving more details of the legal advice?
My question was going to be, is there a budget implication for next year and future years until we have a 5-year land supply again?
I think my response would be that clearly, potentially there is, but we will be looking to work with the planning committee to give them the best support, to guide them in the decisions we're making, as we do all the time anyway, to minimise the risk of decisions that are likely to lead to appeals which aren't supported.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kohler. Right, I've got two more councillors who've indicated on this. I've got Councillor Payne and Councillor Dray. Can I ask, once we've had those questions, that we probably try and wrap up and maybe just go back to a little bit of the, a couple of the points that we raised earlier, just to help some guidance to officers and cabinet as well. So Councillor Payne, we'll come to you first.
Thank you, Chair. I had two brief questions. The first one was almost identical to what Councillor Kennedy has asked already about the King's Hill site, but just in relation to the emerging South Warwickshire local plan, that site on King's Hill, where there's outline permission for that large number of houses, has actually got two strategic growth locations immediately next to it, one to the west and one to the east, and it's all land within Stoneleigh Parish, potentially with 3 sites almost connecting with each other. So I just wanted to ask, please, how does the uncertainty around that application in Table 2, with it having outline permission but not full permission, affect whether those 2 strategic growth locations in the plan go forward or not? What's the relevance of the uncertainty to whether they're adopted as sites?
Yeah, I don't think there is a strong correlation really between the two. So this the King's Hill site does have outline planning permission. So you know, it does have planning permission. We are working hard with Lion Courts to try and bring that forward, and they are undertaking. They're looking at the moment, working with other house builders to see which house builders are wanting to take that site forward. So you know, once they've completed that exercise, hopefully we'll actually see a lot more swifter action in terms of that site coming forward. But I think our working assumption is that the King's Hill site will ultimately be delivered, albeit it's taken longer than we had all hoped, and therefore I don't think it is a major factor in terms of determining whether those sites, potential sites for inclusion in the South Warwickshire Local Plan, are included or not. And I think just to be very clear, obviously, the decisions around which sites are to be included in the South Warwickshire Local Plan haven't yet been taken. Clearly, we've consulted on some potential sites, but the formal final decisions have yet to be taken.
Councillor Davison, did you want to come in on this?
Yes. Andrew Cornford has said about the Lion Court bit. The other bit is Coventry City Council's bit. And because there'd been less movement on that, what we needed was confidence that they plan to bring it forward in the future. So our chief exec and officers have worked very hard to get the assurance that it will come forwards. Otherwise, crudely, should we take it out of the local plan? So I believe that confidence has been had from the exchanges. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, just briefly, in relation to the tilted balance, I think the recent Carla Holmes appeal was one planning application where there's been very detailed legal arguments about the 5-year land supply from the applicant on appeal. And of course, the eventual decision reached by the inspector was in conflict with what planning committee had decided. So that's a case where the tilted balance would be really significant indeed. I was just wondering across the district as a whole, that there must be empirical data available on how many similar cases to Carla Holmes there have been in the last few years where, as I say, that's been a factor that's been really pertinent on appeal, and the planning committee has not been able to actually have its will with the decision it made. Do we have data on that or not?
Forgive me, Councillor, sorry, through you, Chair. Forgive me, Councillor, I'm not quite sure of the question. The Carla Holmes appeal was one that helped identify that we didn't have a 5-year land supply. Before then, all our evidence was that we did. That exposed the fact that we didn't, and obviously we have reflected on that and advised planning committee on any planning applications that have come forward since that appeal decision was received on that. So if there are any sites across the district, that will have been identified in any advice given to planning committee. Was that what you were asking? Forgive me.
The question was just, I was just using that as an illustration. The question was more to ask, in terms of the district as a whole, whether there have been similar appeals. Do we know how many of those there have been in the last few years, where that tilted balance has really been a significant legal factor in the eventual decision? That's what I meant, sorry.
My apologies. Mr. Fisher will tell me if I've got this wrong, but I think that's been the only one since the adoption of our local plan. Is that correct? That's correct, yeah.
Yep. So, Councillor Drake, we're going to come to you.
Yes, it's just a couple of sentences here sort of jumped out at me, and where it says WDC therefore have a score of 104%, and this means that there are currently no consequences for WDC. However, should WDC fall below 100% in future years, there will be consequences. I'm just thinking about the unitary councils that we're going to have in the future. Just wondering if you've foreseen any issues that would come up with planning applications and figures that we need to meet for the required standards that we figures that we're going to have soon, so that we don't fall below the 100%.
Are you clear on the question, or would you like Councillor Dray to elaborate? Sorry, Councillor Dray, could you just be clearer on the question, maybe get closer to the microphone?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the unitary councils. Now that we're doing quite well, we've got 104%, and if we get below the 100%, we're going to have consequences. So just thinking about the unitary councils that we're going to have in the future, if that's going to affect planning applications for new builds, and because we need to have those houses built so that we don't fall below, and we're going to have we possibly have unitary councils in a few years, and how is it going to affect? We're not going to be Warwick District Council anymore, are we? We're going to be something else. And I was just wondering how it's going to affect us in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dray. I'll ask my colleagues to come in if there's anything they want to add to this, but I think the simple answer is our expectation will be that at the time at which we cease to exist as Warwick District Council, if that happens, and become part of a larger unitary authority, our expectation would be that the whole of that authority, whatever that is, would be the basis upon which the housing land supply, the housing requirement would be calculated, and therefore the housing 5-year land supply. I think in practice it's going to be an interesting time for all officers, planning committees, and indeed the planning inspectorate. I would expect us to get guidance, and of course we're not the first council to go through there, but that's something we'll look into, you know, if, as and when we get to that point.
Great, thank you. Thank you, members, and thank you, officers. I just want to bring us back just quickly to earlier discussion. We talked about recommendation 5.3, which was one of the changes to improve performance. Now, I think if I understood rightly from what you said, Mr. Clark, we could, as a council, adopt this. So I understand that there's a national scheme being proposed. We could actually move to that sooner if we wanted to. Is that the case?
The principles around which a national scheme could be developed have been consulted on. We, as a council, could move in part or completely towards those if we chose to. And again, as I say, because we provided a consultation response, we do have, the views of councillors on that already. So yes, that is something we could do if we chose beforehand.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. So in effect, what that's doing is actually giving more power to officers to decide and less to planning committee. I think that's probably the summary, isn't it?
It would, that's correct.
So I'm just interested in members' thoughts on whether that's something we wanted to support, recommend to Cabinet. Councillor Day.
Chair, thank you, as I'd raised that. I think from the perception of our residents, parish councils as well, and town councils, we need to be seen to be doing everything we can to address the 5-year housing land supply, not only getting on with the new local plan, but actually moving our planning applications. And we should trust our officers. If we get that scheme right, and we've consulted on it, then we've got an excellent development team. Let's trust them to crack on and clear any potential backlog. And that's a very strong message, not just to residents, but also to local developers, I'm sure.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Other views from members? Okay, so would committee be comfortable with us putting, I will write to the leader on behalf of the committee, I know he's here, but I think the recommendation is that actually we would ask Cabinet to consider whether the provisions in the national, or the proposed provisions in the national scheme could be brought forward more quickly. Councillor Armstrong.
Just a point of concern that we haven't actually discussed what those provisions are in detail, so I'm uncomfortable with the committee recommending we follow them at this point.
And to be clear, Councillor Armstrong, I'm not recommending that to Cabinet that we follow them. I think what we're asking is this committee would like Cabinet to explore whether that's a direction that this council should be taking.
Which is perfectly fine, sure.
Okay, right. I'm getting enough nods that that's something I think this committee would like Cabinet to explore further. And no doubt, if they do, it will come back as a paper to this committee to consider at some point as well. Well, to Cabinet, and we have the chance to call it in. Right, thank you very much. That has taken about an hour, but sorry, Mr. Cornford, did you want to come in very briefly?
Very briefly, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair. I just thought, in addition to what Mr. Clark said about the government consultation on changing the scheme of delegation, just thought it would be useful to make members aware of another government consultation that took place earlier this year, which was around improving build-out rates on housing sites. So, of course, it feels at the moment that it's all on the local authority. So the local authority gets penalised for non-delivery. I think the new government does seem to be suggesting that it wants to get tougher on developers and put in a range of measures to require things such as delivery trajectories to be submitted as part of applications, and then kind of consequences on the developers if they don't deliver on them. So yeah, I just wanted to make this committee aware of that as well.
Great, thank you. Councillor Day.
Chairman, in your letter, if we could ask our officers to explore 5.3 and any other initiatives that they wish to bring forward, clearly in a more detailed paper for the consideration of members, if you're agreeable.
I'll be comfortable with that as long as I'm getting enough nods from committee. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, officers, for attending. Thank you, committee, for good discussion. So that has taken about an hour. So we're going to try and get through the rest of the agenda a little bit faster. Councillor Davison is...
Just a couple of seconds. Councillor King and I are happy with this, except in terms of workload on officers, it's hugely stretched, so I'd want it to be relatively light touch.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Davison. Appreciate the support on that as well. Right. We're going to move on to bereavement services performance update, which is item 4. Now, this is an item that we requested because it actually came out of the Q3 budget report to Cabinet earlier this year and the underperformance of bereavement services here. So I'm going to hand over to officers in a minute to give us a brief introduction. Can I just remind members there is a confidential appendix to this, so if we want to start to go into the details of that, we will need to go into confidential session. Can I also remind members as well, or just I guess caution members a little bit. This is a very interesting area because it is actually a commercial service that we offer to our residents, and there are actually lots of other purely commercial organisations who provide this service. So it is commercial, but it is also a sensitive subject as well around the whole area of bereavement. I will say I had an excellent tour of the crematorium the other week. It was absolutely fascinating, and clearly some really incredibly valuable work that the team there do for our residents, and I would urge anyone who gets the opportunity to go for a tour in future to take that up, because it is it's in some ways actually quite inspiring, I think, some of the services that we provide there. So I'm going to hand over to Pam Chilvers, Bereavement Services Development Manager, and Zoe Courts, Head of Neighbourhood Services. Would you like to give us a quick overview introduction to the report?
Thank you very much, Councillor Milton, and thank you so much for your kind comments. I'm glad that you found it informative coming around the crematorium. So, obviously at Bereavement Services we look after the crematorium at Oakley Ward, and we also manage the cemeteries across the district. And we do look very carefully at our budgets and at our performance figures, and obviously you asked for an update following the March last year, I think, when the Q3 performance figures were reported, and at that time we were sort of not performing as well as we had in previous years. So I've really tried to set out in the report the sort of the background and the landscape that we operate in at Bereavement Services, and hopefully to try and offer some reassurance to members that we do take very seriously the service that we provide primarily to our residents, but also at the crematorium to residents outside of our district as well, because we certainly provide services to people from other areas, and also obviously we do provide quite a significant surplus into the Council's General Fund on an annual basis. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Pam. Members, any questions on this report? Councillor Armstrong, I'll come to you first.
Thank you, Chair. I did just want to say thank you to the report, the officers for the report. It was really informative and really well written as well, so that's much appreciated. I just wanted to raise a question that stood out about the Dignity crematorium, because it seems to be increasing or at least maintaining market share from Appendix 1, but it's also one of the most expensive crematoria in the list. So what's going on there that's different, and could you comment on that at all?
I think it's really difficult for me to give you a factual answer, because obviously they are a private operator. So whereas, for example, our local authority neighbours I have really good working relationships with, and it's very easy for me to pick up the telephone to a neighbouring local authority and say, oh, you know, we've noticed this is happening with our arrangements, have you got something similar going on? And they will confirm that, which I think is how I was able to answer some of the questions that came previously. Whereas obviously this is a private concern, they are not going to share their data with me. I can speculate as to the reason for that, and I think there's probably a referral in the confidential appendix as to why I believe their numbers are being impacted.
Okay, Councillor Bond.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for this report. It's been very, very interesting. On Appendix 1, Oakley Wood took a bit of a hit in 2024. Taking in consideration we had the roof done this year, do we know where we're going to end up on an overall figure for Oakley Wood in 2025? Is there a forecast for it?
We're obviously just at the point where we've got the Q2 monitoring that will be gone through later on. I know that's not my report. It's really difficult, I have to confess, for us to do an accurate prediction much before the end of Q3, because what we do find is that the sort of the winter period, we can take a stock and look back and say, actually, are we there or thereabouts with our numbers so far? And if we're under, are we likely to make that up in potentially a peak over the winter months? So historically, there isn't a profile to be had across the year where we can. So if we're really quiet in the summer, we might be busier in the winter. I know that's really a woolly answer and possibly not what you were looking for, so I apologise for my ramblings. We're kind of doing okay. The impact on the roof was more last year than this year because it was kind of the tail end of Q4.
Can I just ask then, how do the quarters run and the years run? Because I presume 2024 is January the 1st to December the 31st. Bearing in mind we're now nearly in December, is that 11 months of the year? Or is 2024 actually 24, 25?
Because, so yeah, apologies. So on the statistics that I provided for you, which on Appendix 1, which compare all of the crematoria kind of locally to us, all of the crematoria report their statistics on a calendar year, whereas our Q3 is Q3 of the financial year. So I can certainly tell you where we are up to the 30, or where we are up until today in terms of November, which will then be reported at the beginning of next financial year, which for us is Q4.
Yeah, it's just comparing like for like, really. Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see where 2025 is going, whether we 2024 was the roof, and whether 2025 has gone back up to 1,700, 1,800 or whatever. Just be nice to know we're holding our market share and not being outdone by Dignity and being too expensive or whatever.
Councillor Kohler, then Councillor Dray.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report. Are there any investments that you would like to see made to the crematorium or the grounds that would mean that either you think the number of cremations we could handle a year would increase as a result, or perhaps the amount that we charge for them, we could justifiably increase it on the back of it and make our money back in a relatively short time?
I think it's really difficult. Yes, I could come up with a list of a million things that I'd love to have done at the crematorium, but I'm also conscious that we operate an environment. I have not got the only general fund asset, and there are other buildings, there are other projects. It's a massive. I'm quite sure that the budget for maintenance across all of our buildings, obviously, we all have to be fair about what gets done. Yes, I don't want the roof to leak. And we don't operate at 100% capacity with the cremators. So spending any more money on the cremation equipment at this point, it's serviced quarterly, which is what it has to be, serviced quarterly. Obviously, if we have any breakdowns, they are attended to. We've got a contract in place with the cremator manufacturers, so we do have that done. Yes, we have had our cremators since 2009, so they will be coming up in the next perhaps 5 to 10 years where we want to look at those cremators. We use LPG. Technology moves on with all of these things. We're certainly not at that point at this moment, but certainly in the future we would need to look at that. At the moment, yes, I'd love my roof not to leak. So the south roof is fixed, but we've got umbrellas in the north at the minute.
I totally understand what you say about calls on the general fund. I do think, as you said in your introduction to the report, you do make a contribution, a net contribution. So I think you are different. So I think there is a very good justification if there is a case where you could say, if we invest in this, then either the number of people we could serve would go up, or we could justify a 10-20% increase in fees because we're below the average locally. I think you should. I think Cabinet should be looking for those sorts of opportunities and encouraging that kind of case to be brought forward. The other question I did have, I believe there's a Friends of Oakley Wood who kind of look after the wooded area. What's your relationship like with them?
I have to say they're Friends of Oakley Woods, not the Friends of Oakley Wood Crematorium. So I think yes, we don't have a falling out with them, but equally their emphasis, their motivation is not the crematorium or the bereavement services, it is the wider woodland. And we do work quite closely with our colleagues in the green spaces. We do, when we're having the green flag inspections, for example, we are always included in that, and the Friends are there. If the Friends are having a particular event, then they will get in touch with us and tell us so that we can perhaps put posters up on our notice boards, and make sure that we've got the waiting rooms open so they can use the toilet facilities on those particular days that they've got events. So I would say they're Friends of the Woods rather than Friends of the Crematorium.
I understood that. I was just wondering what the relationship was like. It sounds like it's cordial, but not particularly deep. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment.
Right, thank you, Councillor Coder. I just want to build on Councillor Coder's points, actually, because I think I did do, just looking at the figures that were presented, which were really, really helpful. If we'd maintained our market share of cremations over the last, we had the curve from 2014 to 2025. If we'd maintained our market share over that period, we'd actually be looking at about £600,000 worth of revenue every year, £600,000 of income. I guess my question maybe it's a question to Cabinet and maybe to the Deputy Chief Executive as part of the change programme, is this actually something we should be looking at as somewhere we're actually investing to bring things up to the standard of somewhere like a Dignity in Nuneaton that seems to be doing really well, might actually have quite a significant impact on the amount of income that we generate from the site. I don't know whether a member of Cabinet or Deputy.
No, I think there needs to be a reflection on the investment need we put into the facility. I think, as has been highlighted, there are competing buildings for an investment pool, but I think we're going to recognise we're very lucky actually in this district to have the facility we've got in Oakley Wood. We've also got a service that's nationally recognised as well in terms of the level of service it provides. I think we've got some of the commercial work underway with Commercial Gov, I know that the new website and those sorts of things underway. But I think the point Councillor Cole has made as well around actually that refresh to the facility as well, to make sure we maintain that physical presence and the impression we want to give. So I think that's a sensible action for us to take away and look at how we prioritise the planned investment we've got within our financial envelope.
Right, thank you, Mr. Knight. Do you want to come in, Councillor Chilvers?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, I think we've kind of got that phase one of how we present our offer better on using the website, which I think there, we've recognised there is room for improvement. That's gone through that part's gone through the change programme. I think there is scope for further work, which is kind of phase 2 and 3. So I think it's trying to work out like what the programme of work is on that. And then, yeah, I mean, I absolutely welcome business cases coming forward using the Investor Save Fund to see how we can deliver better for the service.
I think it's actually invest to make income rather than invest to save. So invest to grow.
Invest, yes, it's called the Investor Save Fund, but yes, I take your point.
Yeah, okay.
Right, I've got Councillor Dray.
Then Councillor Knight.
Yes, it's just about the service developments and remedies. I was just interested in that you've got a new website coming out soon, and I just thought it might be good that if the councillors, if we could have a presentation of that when it comes live, if that's all right.
I'm sure that will absolutely be possible. I am working with our colleagues in the media team and with our existing website developer internally. One of the things that's really kind of exciting for us is that there are proposals that will change the themes on the website. So that will be across the Warwick District Council website, and the Bereavement Services website will be able to feel as though it's separate, but won't actually be separate. So we'll still then benefit from being able to have that in-house knowledge of how to do it, so we don't get left behind and don't end up continually paying for hosting and updating services. So we've kind of benefited, if you like. We highlighted it was an issue and were given the go-ahead, but to look at it in a slightly different way, and that was a really valuable thing. So, but yes, certainly when it's ready, we'll do that.
Great, thank you, Councillor Dray. Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On 3.6, you said that there's a growing demands for direct cremation now. What pushing that up?
I think particularly this is something that we've seen in leaps and bounds since COVID, and I think perhaps during COVID people weren't allowed to attend funerals, so I think the idea that you can have a funeral without a ceremony has kind of taken root for some people. Before COVID it was referred to as perhaps the David Bowie funeral, so where there have been celebrities who have had this type of funeral and it's been publicised. David Bowie, quite famously in my world, perhaps not famously in your world, I don't know, had a funeral with no ceremony, and that was at his request. So it's just a change in attitudes towards funerals, really.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Knight, and thank you for getting us onto David Bowie. I think that was a good diversion for scrutiny. Councillor Day.
Chair, thank you. Firstly, I welcome the report. It's an excellent report. It's very encouraging to see the care and attention that's being given to this important service, which is based in my ward, Bishop's Tatchbrook, and in a really beautiful woodland setting. And that's where the Friends of Oakley Wood are focusing on the wood, of which I'm a member, declared. And I just wanted to congratulate you on the quality of the service. I unfortunately have reached the age where I'm attending far too many funerals, many at the Crem, and I wanted to highlight to members, though, it's not it's obviously a good business generator for us, but it is also a good business generator for the Leopard pub, which I think does a pretty good trade in wakes. What I'm saying is we look at social impact. If we look at social impact, services like this not only meet a need, but they also really help support local economies. And not that, death is part of life. So I just want to congratulate you. That was the principal reason I put the microphone on. So thank you very much for the report and all the work you do.
Thank you very much for those comments.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Day. So I think probably summing up, I think what we're hearing from this is firstly, a huge thank you to Pam for bringing the report forward and actually a real recognition of what the team do there. But I think there is a desire, I think, from us to ask Cabinet, as part particularly of the change programme, to look at the opportunities that there might be here for some investment that would actually create some growth in income for us. So, Pam, you may be one of the few people who's come to Scrutiny and we've said you should be asking for more money, because actually it is a fantastic service, it's a vital service, and it's incredibly important as well. So I think if we could make those sort of, again, those would be sort of feedback back to Cabinet. I know we've got key people here. Oh, sorry, Councillor Barton, did I miss you?
No, I've just thought about it, because we like 5-year plans, etc., and you mentioned the crematoria, the ovens may want replacing in 5 years. Is there some sort of business plan within the council to replace these crematoria instead of having I would say, a bill with several noughts on the end to replace them when they become past life, when they too want cremating?
We haven't drawn up a business plan as yet, but as we are reaching, and it is possible to repair it and repair it and repair it and repair it, but as we get further along the lifespan of the cremator, the things that need to be repaired, it's perhaps a bit like your car, where, every year you put new tyres on it, but there comes a point where you need an engine and gearbox. So before we get to the engine and gearbox problem, then yes, we will be looking at that. And there are opportunities at that point then to look at whether we stay with LPG or whether other fuel sources may be available that have changed now.
May I ask then, are they ours? Are they bought or are they leased?
No, they belong to us.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Barton. I think actually there's a real theme here, isn't there, about actually seeing this as it is a commercial operation. It has costs, but there are also ways to invest which help create that income as well. And perhaps that's the urging we should be giving to Cabinet, is to think about how this operates within the council in the way that actually other commercial organisations would do as well. So thank you, members. Thank you, officers, for coming as well. You want one more?
Sorry, if I could just have a little plug, if anybody doesn't mind. For those of you who did miss the open day recently, we will be having another open day in May that will coincide with Dying Matters Week. So I will make sure that you are all included on the invites for that. So thank you for your indulgence in my little plug there, Chair.
Thank you, Pat. I'd endorse that. I would thoroughly recommend members go along. Okay, right. We'll keep moving. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you wish, but I won't be offended if you decide you have other things to do. I just want to do two quick things on the work programme then, and then I'm going to shuffle it around slightly, so we're actually going to let Mr. Leithley present the Q2 report. So just on the work programme, and this relates to the Cabinet agenda, there were a couple of items on the Cabinet agenda that could potentially have been called in for discussion, but I'm going to ask for them to be dealt with slightly differently. So one is item 24, which is the disposal of 1 Warwick Street. So I'm going to ask that actually once that is disposed of, at an appropriate time afterwards, we get a report to this Cabinet with an analysis of how we got to where we got to, and how we've moved on from there. I would like, if possible, for that report to be public, if we think we can do it in a way that enables it to be made public.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, great, good, thank you. And the other item as well was Cabinet Item 22, which was the pump room's roof. There's obviously been a few challenges with that. I think rather than, it's one of those things we've just got to get on and do it. And there are reasons for doing that. However, it appears there have been some challenges in the way that we've planned that, for instance. So what I would ask is, we've got a report coming on the work programme, which is about our project management capability and capacity, I believe. And I think it would be good if, as part of that report, we included some focus on the pump rooms as maybe an example of where we, if we'd have done things differently, we might have got ourselves into a better situation. So I think that would be the one that I would ask us to cover. Okay, so this will be future work programme. Right, now we're going to move on. Cabinet, so Cabinet call-ins. So we're going to go straight to item 12, which is the Q2 budget update, which I called in as chair. It's an important item that we need to make sure we give some scrutiny to. So I'll be expecting some good questions from members this evening. So, Mr. Leafley, would you like to give us a quick overview of the report and key matters?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, today we're presenting the Q2, the quarter two budget for 2025-26. Currently, the Q2 shows a adverse position for general fund of 968,000, which is a change from Q1 of an increase of 779,000. Within the HRA, we're currently showing an adverse position of 576,000, which is actually a decrease of 279,000 from quarter one. Within the report, we've selected the key variances for each area within general fund and within the HRA. We've also shown the current position within capital and the current reserves position. The charts do show by department after reserve movements. Now, where the reserve movements is where we have funded certain items from reserve, where if they underspend or overspend, they'll go into that reserve or be funded from that reserve. So the chart is actually showing the 968,000, for instance, in general fund, is the effect on the bottom line of the general fund, which will go to the volatility reserve. So, do you have any questions?
Right, members, any questions? Councillor Day.
I always love this report when it comes every year, because it's kind of one of those reports that we're not really there yet. We're waiting for the rest of everything to land. And as soon as you look at the assumptions, you know there's some really heavy lifting still to do. It's indicative, is what I'd say, and I welcome it for that. And as, from a scrutiny perspective, I think it does raise some real questions around our reserves and actually how we're managing those reserves. And I mean just that we have the protection of £2 million or thereabouts in their volatility reserve. I always enjoy that name, having a volatility anything. Sounds like a fun thing to have. But my point being is that we're committing about half of this as it stands at the moment until we know what government's doing. The context, I'm sure Councillor Chilvers will respond in this respect, is all the other changes around government funding for, you know, the settlement, etc., and where it all ends up landing. So I feel like I've seen the cards, but they're all in the air. I can see them pretty clearly from this report, but can I get some guidance as to where we think the landing, or what's the landing going to look like? Are we going to be pulling our hair out as we do our February meeting? And I'm probably asking that of Councillor Chilvers, but I'd also appreciate officers' views on this. I'm sorry, that's a pretty open question, but it is a pretty open report, if you don't mind me presenting it that way.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Are you asking a question on item 5 or item 12?
I beg your pardon. The wrong piece. I apologise. I am asking a question on item 5.
So item 5 will be considered by the Budget Review Group tomorrow. I mean, Councillor Chilvers, you're at liberty to give a response if you'd like to.
Well, I was going to say similarly, it sounded like an item 5 question. Clearly, they're not entirely unlinked, so to speak on the Q2 report, obviously we need to have sight of whether we think that this projected variance is going to be pulled in by the end of the year, and also if it's not going to be pulled in, how much of that is a one-off variation happening this year and what might flow into a reoccurring next year. And that's why I think, as you say, you know, having this Q2 report is always indicative is really important. And I think if you look at the main variations here, actually, there's one, obviously, which is around homelessness, which sticks out sort of more than anything else. And that is one that, you know, the homelessness team are looking on and addressing. There is an issue with that one that it is quite demand-led, Councillor Melrose might want to say, and so it's a little bit harder to predict whether they're going to pull that win or not. But it's helpful to me that it's there so that we can keep an eye on it, and I'll hand over to Councillor Melrose probably.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Melrose, before you come in, because my question on item 12 was about this actually. So it was, I think it's a similar thing about much of the variance is actually about housing costs, isn't it, and homelessness costs, and how far we see that continuing. What's the trajectory? What can we do to try and manage that? Because it sounds like an ongoing issue.
It is a very ongoing issue, Councillor Milton. So basically, at the beginning of November, we experienced our highest number of placements. If you look at temporary accommodation, we have generally got a shortfall in one-bedroom needs because of them temporary accommodation. Obviously, they can present themselves, and obviously statutory duty, and a lot of them are single-based placements. We have, you know, families present, but it's mainly one bedrooms we're looking at. So obviously, one of the actions is obviously to review our temporary accommodation, because we do have some that are age restricted, and sort of saying, actually, is that the best use? Could we, you know, because being age restricted, it might mean actually we're not getting people that demographic. So they're having a view of that one. Obviously, we've taken on a other house, which has helped reduce spend, but then the county council dropped 9 care leavers on us quite quickly. And obviously, we have a statutory duty to house them together. We've been looking at the cost of bed and breakfast, obviously trying to look at voids, and I think if Councillor Bode was here, we've had a long discussion at Housing Scrutiny around our voids. We need to get that down. At the moment we're 80, we need to get down to roughly the average of 45 days. So there's some things we know we need to fix. Is it going to be an overnight fix? No, because like we said, it could be up until when people present, and we do know normally there is a bit of a spike round after Christmas because of many circumstances, but obviously we're trying to look at how can we reduce the cost and bring the costs back within this financial year. Obviously, Councillor Chilvers will be there with his jigsaw puzzle at my door and asking me to fill in the blanks.
Thank you, Councillor Melrose. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. My first question was going to be on the homelessness rent rebate, so I'll pass on that. Thank you very much for the answer. The second one was more of a broad point about the agency use comment in the report that I believe says we're around $500,000 over budget for agency use. I just wondered, rather than ask about that in detail here, whether it would be helpful or what members thought about bringing that as a future report to the committee, actually, in terms of what the council does around agency use and what we're trying to do to reduce that. Crossed my mind on looking at this. Just a thought to raise.
Yeah, I think it could be something to consider as part of the work programme for the committee. I think some of the recruitment challenges in housing, I'll be a little bit on housing specifically, is a bit specialist in areas like building safety, stock condition, and some of those specialist roles where we have been reliant on agency because we just can't recruit, not through the want of trying. We have made changes in sort of the general fund staffing in terms of where we have reduced areas of long-term agency use, but I think it may be a helpful discussion topic. The other area around this is around linked to LGR, because as we approach LGR, we may struggle to recruit people, knowing that the end date of the council could be in sight in sort of 2 or 3 years' time. So there is a risk being flagged around potential future increasing agency use while you're navigating that LGR timeline. So I think it may be a useful one for members to understand those competing pressures and how we're managing that demand the best way we can.
Great, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's call that on to Stephen.
I just wanted to stay here as well. Maybe I do need to write that a little bit better. We don't generally budget for agency, so a lot of that is covered by underspend within existing establishment posts as well. So I think maybe I need to look at that a bit better and write that a bit better to make it more sensible.
Councillor Melrose.
And just to add on, I think where there has been agency, we have tried to move some on to fixed term contracts. So there is the plan, if there is an agency for a long period of time, we try and convert into fixed term agency. So I know if Tracy Dolphin was here, she would be relaying that answer.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kohler.
Thank you, Chair. I think just picking up on the mistake that was made in terms of item 5 versus item 12, and one of them coming tonight and the other going tomorrow, I think we all know that councillors love to come to these meetings 2 or 3 nights running, but I think it's unfair potentially to ask officers to also be coming, or maybe above and beyond. So I guess I would make a plea that in the future this sort of report goes to the budget review group rather than to the ONS committee itself, but I don't know if I'm being controversial, but anyway. And then just moving swiftly on, to make just to prove that I've read the report, in the first table on page 3, in the neighbourhood variance, I think there's a typo. I think it should be 760 rather than 7,760,000. Is that, am I correct there? So on page 3, in the first table, there's a row neighbourhood, which reads the budget is 8,524,000, the forecast is 9,284,000, and it says the variance is 7,760,000. So I think I was reasonably confident in asserting in a public session that might be a typo.
Yes, it is. I apologise for that, and I'll make sure it's corrected.
As our Deputy Chief Exec is fond of pointing out, it's good to sprinkle these in just to make sure that we read the reports. So before he says it, I thought I'd say it. And then, so naturally my brain latched onto that. And then going into the neighbourhood on page 4 in the table there, the largest variance appears to be in car parking. And then going down to, where's that treated? In 2.6.5 on page 6, it says that that's rather than costs going up, it's income coming down due mainly to Covent Garden. So I just wanted to make sure I was tracing that through, and I guess does that mean that when some of those spaces come back, when the building work is done, are we expecting that variance to sort of go away again? So it's effectively a temporary variance. Am I reading all of that right?
Yes, on both of those occasions, both the car parks for St Nick's and for Covent Garden, we are expecting that to be a short-term hit and then come back again once it's all available and things change.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor Kohler. And just to come back to your point on the budget review group, actually this report is not within the terms of reference of the budget review group. So if it were wanted, we would need to change those terms of reference.
I would personally be in favour of exploring that.
I would suggest that might be something that the chairs groups want to discuss. There are advantages and disadvantages to doing that. So, Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I think one member has already mentioned the big favourable variances in the homelessness and housing advice category. And do please correct me if I'm reading the report the wrong way, but with with an advice service showing favourable variance, isn't there a risk of spending too little on it in the short term and simply running up costs in the other categories going forward? Surely if we spend too little on housing advice, in the longer term, it runs up costs on the rough sleeping initiative. Is there a way of just making sure that we're not spending too little on giving advice and prevention services?
So you're, so I'm clever. Do you want to answer, Tony?
I think if this was an ongoing trend, then I would be concerned and along the lines you said. But actually, because this is, in Q1 there was actually a variance that was a bit more, and actually it's coming back towards budget. So actually, and that tolerance of 117,000 in that service probably isn't a massive tolerance. So if it was an ongoing trend, I would be concerned, but in this circumstance at the moment, I'm not. But one to look out in Q3 and Q4.
And to follow on to Councillor Chivers, like I said in my previous answer, it fluctuates, but we do traditionally see a trend up in the advice around after Christmas. So I wouldn't be surprised we're at the position now when we go and look at the quarter 3 budget that would have gone down even further. But I can understand your point, prevention is cheaper than the cure.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, if not, we'll wrap up. Mr. Leafley, thank you very much. As ever, you make some quite complicated stuff actually quite easy for us all to understand. So thank you for all your work on this report. I know it's been something that's been evolved over a number of years, so it's really appreciated. So thank you. Right. Okay.
Sorry, Chair. Just in terms of
yes. Beyond thanking officers for their work on the report, are there any comments that we wish to make? Do we want to just highlight, or at least note to Cabinet, the importance of getting our homelessness strategy right, and because of the ongoing impact of that on our finances, that seems like an appropriate thing to do. Thank you, Patricia, for the reminder. Councillor Chilvers, you wanted to come back in.
Sorry, I just wanted to give a shout out to Place Arts and Economy, who once again have kind of overperformed as they have done through last year as well. I just think it's worth crediting areas when they're performing well.
Thank you, Councillor Chilvers. Right, okay, let's move on to, well, go back to, so item 9 called in. So this is about subsidy control. I think, is one of this the confidential appendix? So again, we might have to be careful around this one. It was called in by the Liberal Democrat group because of concerns about the transparency of the processes involved. So I think, Councillor Kohler, I think you called this one in. So I'm going to ask Mr. Knight to just give us a quick introduction, and then I'll hand over to Councillor Kohler, and we'll see if we need to go into confidential session.
Yeah, I can see that obviously the information is taken as read. This isn't an area I'm an expert on, so what I may need to do, depending on the questions you ask, which may be a lot of them, I may need to take them away right back to the committee, if that's okay, because it's an area I've not always been involved in directly myself, really. So I'll try my best, but don't have high expectations of me tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kohler, do you want to scope out the questions?
Yes, as you say, the concerns were around transparency of processes where subsidies may come in. So I guess the place to start, and hopefully it's safe in public session, is to talk in general terms about what processes there should be followed where a subsidy may be applied. So what kind of process should be followed by officers when we're in a situation where subsidies may result?
Yeah, so I'm going to caveat my answer, because I will write to everybody, yourself, Councillor Keller, and the committee, to clarify the exact information. My understanding is that when the council does provide a subsidy, there should be a consultation period. This is it's published, the subsidy. There is a consultation period of, say, for example, a month, where anybody can then challenge that subsidy. But I will confirm in writing the more detail around that.
Yeah, so I guess some details about what that consultation should involve. You know, for example, you know, who should be consulted? You know, is it something that just gets popped on our website and a month later we say, oh, okay, that's done? Or are there some strict guidelines that say, you know, that control who is contacted and prompted to complete the consultation?
My understanding is that, based on one we're currently working on at the moment, is that it's published for a period of a month. But I will confirm the process element to you, Councillor Cole, and the rest of the committee.
And again, without wishing to take us near a confidential session, I think if some specifics could be shared along those lines relating to what's in the confidential appendix, I think that would be warmly welcomed as well. Have I managed to avoid going into confidential?
Done very well, Councillor Kohler. I've got two more councillors coming in, though, so we may end up there. Councillor Armstrong first, then Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. This should avoid confidential, but it might be unfairly specific, so if it needs to be put off, then fair be it. Does this policy, or how does this policy apply to Milverton Homes and housing land purchases? I'm thinking of some of these big land purchases where perhaps the council offers a price that may or may not be the market price. Does that apply as a subsidy, and should that be treated in the same way?
No, I don't think that does. I don't think so.
Direct, thank you.
But what I will do, Councillor Armstrong, is again, I will confirm that for you as well.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
I'm sorry, but I would like to move that we do go into confidential session. I have a specific case I'd like to cover on this matter.
And is that the case in the confidential appendix? Is it, or is it a different?
Well, I'm struggling to see a confidential appendix. Now, again, I do bounce around, as you noticed, with my selection of items, papers last time. But I've got the confidential document pack up online for Cabinet, and I'm scanning down, and I've even managed to get the table of contents up. You'll be very pleased to see, Patricia. But I can't. I can see the actual paper, item 9, but when I scan down...
Page 28.
Page 28, let's just...
Item 28.
Item 28. Got it, thank you. Yes, it does pertain to the confidential item.
Okay, have I got the wording?
You don't have to read it, you can just say it as it's on the agenda.
Right, okay. Okay, so I'll just do, right, okay, so we are going to consider the confidential items on the Cabinet agenda which fall within the remit of the committee, and the only items to be considered are those which committee services have received notice on, which is this particular item. So do we have to vote on that, or do we just go? Right, okay, that's my proposal. Seconder from Councillor Kohler. Favour? Great, right, we are going to go into confidential session. Okay, welcome back to anyone who's still online watching. We're now talking about item 15 on the Cabinet agenda, which has been called into committee. This is a proposal for a low-cost loan scheme relating to measures for climate-friendly measures, so effectively providing loans to members to retrofit, residents to retrofit their homes. Do we have any other questions from the committee on this, or would you like? I have a few questions. In some ways, I hate going at loads of questions from the chair, but I have to say I've got a few concerns about this, because actually it's a big sum of money that we're thinking about, and there are certain things that I haven't seen in the report that has come forward. So I'm not sure. Is there anything you can do to set my mind at rest about our ability to, in effect, bring forward a proposal for what is quite a large lending scheme? Because if I were working in a bank at the moment, I would be expecting much more information to be coming forward at this point. So information about planned default rates, for instance, an actual interest rate, number of loans we were going to give. There's a lot of stuff that, for me, I don't think is here, which I would expect to see given the amount that is being requested at the moment.
Sure. So we have got indicative figures for, I think, for all of those points in here. So we're looking at 2% interest rate over 10 years. The number of loans expected over the total, I think, was 446. Sorry, I'm just looking for the actual 456, with an average value of £9 million pounds, £9,000 is what we're expecting to do over the whole period of the loan. The default rate, we have had one lender tell us what their default rate is, but that's commercially confidential, so I might have to supply that actual figure somewhere else.
Okay, but I didn't see that. That wasn't in the report, from what I could see. I did look for it, and I couldn't see it in the case that was in the appendix.
It might not be in the case that was in the appendix. It is in the main report itself. 1.1.1 talks about the interest rate and the length of the loans. And then 1.3.3 is where the number of loans and the average loan value is stated. The default rate, I think, just went into the pre-market engagement as very low. But as I say, I do have a specific figure from one of the lenders we engage with, but it is commercially confidential.
Okay, I sort of understand that. I do have a concern we're getting into something that we've not. If we look at the way that this report is written and the recommendations, we are basically being asked to delegate authority to do quite a lot to actually bring the scheme forward. So this whole report. So whilst I get what council is trying to do, and I'm supportive of that in principle. But I think the way that the report is written at the moment is there is not actually a lot of detail here about the scheme. I don't see a lot of robustness in here, and yet what we're asking Cabinet to do is actually delegate an awful lot of authority to basically take us all the way from pre-procurement right to actually launching the scheme. And I seek other members' views on that, because I don't want to just be leading the committee, but I think I have some concerns about that. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. I've questioned, it's not so much about the financial arrangements and the loan scheme, but what it's trying to achieve, which is to reduce energy bills or enable people to take out loans which will enable them to reduce energy bills, and at the same time to reduce carbon emissions across the district. And I think it would be quite helpful, and maybe I've missed it, as I've not read every part of every appendix to this paper. Where is the measurement of what we're achieving? Are we, in effect, are we getting enough reduction in energy bills for residents and enough reduction in carbon emissions from the amount we're investing? Or if we were taking this sum of money and investing it in something else, would we be able to achieve more? Is that a calculation that's been made, and how will the effectiveness of the loan scheme in terms of its overall ambitions be monitored?
So, yes, I think you're right in that a calculation hasn't been done in terms of the expected CO, like kilograms or tons of CO2 emission reduction to be achieved from this. I think part of the problem of doing that is that although we've got an idea of what the loan value is, I'm not sure that we have a profile of what that actually gets spent on. What I think I'm going to suggest, and I hope that I'm allowed to do this, is that I can go back to one of the providers that we spoke to in pre-engagement, and they have said they've got a carbon measurement tool. I can go back and ask them for some more details on that, possibly see if we can find out anything from other loan schemes that have happened. The principle in terms of actually us trying to measure those reductions would be that we would use established benchmarks for an installation. So we would know, every kilowatt of solar PV that gets put on a house gives you this much reduction, insulation gives you this much, whatever. So I think I need to kind of go back and have a look and see whether or not I can get some kind of like indication from other councils as to what they are seeing. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I don't know whether we want to recommend the Cabinet before finally going ahead on this, or at least asks for that sort of data to be brought into the calculations, because when we come to justify it to the electors, we need to be able to say, yes, we've done this for these reasons, and this is what we anticipate will result.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. We'll come back to that at the end, but I think that's probably a good. And I think we are probably in the point of recommendations here rather than comments to Cabinet on this one. Councillor Day, then Councillor Barton.
Chairman, I found Appendix 2 very helpful. I'd encourage members, if they can view it with me, I'd just like to step them through some thinking here. At the moment, the recommended interest rate is 2%. Correct me if I'm going wrong here, but the fundamental is there's 3 million down on capital, and at the end on 2%, the return is what the amount to be returned would be just over 2 million. So there's a roughly £920,000 subsidy, effectively, that the district council, that is all of our ratepayers, would be providing to 456 residents. And I'm not clear what the net zero benefit's going to be per resident or per pound spent. The reason I'm raising this is it would have been good to see a sensitivity analysis around if the interest rate was 3%. There you can see the cost is now 570,000 for 475, so more loans are available. And who knows, maybe there would be a better outcome with regard to the net zero output. I personally find the 4 or 5% option quite reasonable, and certainly in a commercial market, quite a cheap way of borrowing money to do this important work. And if we did it at 5%, dare I say, we might actually have a small surplus that we could then reinvest again in a further scheme to try and get some sort of rolling benefit, and we actually get to 518 residents. So the differential here is almost another 50 residents, and we make more money. So where's sensitivity analysis around the interest rate setting? And to Councillor Kennedy's very valid point around the total net, carbon emissions that we're saving through a scheme like this. I don't think this is ready. I really think there needs to be a lot more work before Cabinet make a decision on it, and I would be encouraging this committee to recommend that Cabinet withdraw this report, go away and do much more careful thinking around the cost benefits to our climate and to our residents before investing £3 million.
Thank you, Councillor Day. I think to your subsidy point is interesting, and I think the interest one, right, no, we're back. The interest rate was a particular area I was concerned about. So if I was checking yesterday about savings rates, so you can currently get an instant access ISA at 4.5%. So if I happen to have £9,000 and was considering putting solar panels on my house, what I would do is actually put that £9,000 in a 4.5% ISA, and I'd borrow from the council at 2%, and over the life of the loan, the council taxpayers of Warwick District would have subsidised me a nice, probably £2,500 worth of interest. And I think that's the level of sort of the sensitivity analysis that we need to start getting to. And that's why I'm sort of concerned that actually we're not really, I think, being asked now to effectively say, yeah, just crack on and take this through and launch it. I just don't think we're there yet. So, sorry. Councillor Barton.
I can do a bit more, but all I can echo is Councillor Day's and your comments. My sort of thing is, when do we become bank? So we're on about borrowing 3 million, in effect, then lending it out at below interest, a very low interest rate, which I was going to say exactly the same thing, is that I would actually stick it in. I did some at the Coventry Building Society, that's 4.5%. And I just don't get it, because that means I am paying for something that, let's face it, 456 households isn't a lot of households in Warwick District at all. How many households are there in Warwick District? I just don't see why we should be losing £1 million.
Councillor Kohler. And then, sorry, I don't think so. We'll do Councillor Kohler and then Councillor Davison will come to you.
Thank you. I think I should just make it clear that I think it's very disappointing that the portfolio holder isn't here, because it's his policy, it's his paper. Officers should not feel that any of this is directed at them. This is directed at the portfolio holder very squarely. I would like to just question, in 1.1.1, the recommendation, it talks about the 2% interest rate. Is that fixed, or is that a variable interest rate?
No, that interest rate isn't fixed. It's a proposal.
Sorry, I mean, over time, over the 15 years of the loan, will it go up and down in conjunction with something? So is it tracking, for example, the Bank of England base rate, or is it fixed at 2% for the lifetime of the loan?
No, it's fixed at 2% for the lifetime of the loan, yeah.
So in terms of the repayments, if we are borrowing the 3 million, then the potential exposure, if Bank of England base rate goes up, I guess our exposure, I guess it's theoretically capped somewhere, but it's potentially quite a bit more. I mean, I'm no financial expert, but I would really want a financial expert to give us a view on what our potential exposure is. And also in 1.1.1, it says scheme open to landlords as well as private owner occupiers. So I guess the 450 people might not be our residents that are benefiting from this. It might be 450 landlords from outside. So officers, just shaking your head. So just before I go and labour this one, am I right that the scheme is open to landlords as well as private owner occupiers?
Yes, the scheme is open to private landlords, but their houses would need to be in the Warwick District Council area.
Absolutely, but the landlord may live outside of the area. So the actual beneficiary, the financial beneficiary of this might be 450 residents. I guess they may not even live in the country.
Yes, it's possible. I mean, I don't know whether we can restrict the scheme in terms of where the landlords live. I think that's a fair comment to make.
I guess just to be clear, there's no current restrictions in the scheme, of the design of the scheme that the portfolio holder is recommending to move forward with. Is that right?
As far as I understand it, yes, that's correct, yeah.
Councillor Davison, I will come to you if you want to come in.
Yes, there have been quite a few points raised. I'm not sure I'll manage to cover them all. And in fact, I've forgotten the first one. Move on to the next one, the 2%. This was the engagement with suppliers who were suggesting that 4% is, I know interest rates change, but close to commercial rates. So it's then, why are we different? And the basic thing there is, will we get the uptake? Second bit is, are we a bank? No, we're not a bank. We're not doing this for commercial reasons. We're doing it to promote, to tackle the climate emergency whilst reducing bills for people. So this is more an investment in getting the thing kick-started, because it's a tragedy, I'd say, in this country that we're doing so little to improve our energy security, reduce bills and tackle the climate emergency. So that's what we're doing it for. If you want a financial investment, you don't do this. So I think that's really quite important to consider. The bit I did forget, though, Councillor Milton, both Councillor Chilvers and I think your point about this shouldn't be the only time it comes to, Cabinet, and hence scrutiny is a very good one. And I think we're both agreeing that we accept, if you're making that a recommendation, we will accept it, and we will look to see how we can change that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davison. I know Councillor Barton wants to come back in. I think probably most of the people on the committee, I won't speak for everyone, but I think many people would see actually the goal of this, the end result, lower carbon, I think we could all get behind. It's the mechanism which is the problem. And I think just, and again, this is where, sorry, I get a little bit of a geek when it comes to financial things, having spent 13 years working for a bank. Yeah, I did look at commercial loan rates yesterday. The cheapest one I could find was 5.8%. So we're basically offering about a third of a commercial rate. And that's the sort of analysis I think we need to see in the paper, and a proper discussion about what that rate should be. Councillor Barton, I think you wanted to come back in.
Yeah, it was just one other thing. Has an allowance been made for loan defaulters?
Yes, in terms of when they've done the calculations as to like where the figures end up, they've taken into account the figure that we've been given by one of the providers, which, as I say, the actual number's commercially confidential. It's extremely low, the default rate that they've had. So.
Right, thank you. Right, so I think, can I suggest, so a comment back to Cabinet is that we recognise why this scheme is coming forward and the outcome it is trying to achieve. However, committee are concerned about the lack of a full business case, sensitivity analysis, and a calculation of the actual climate benefits that are sought to be achieved through this. Committee therefore recommends that whilst we are comfortable that work should continue on the scheme, it should not, trying to find a polite way of saying, get anywhere near implementation. It should have to go through another cabinet report before it is actually progressed, and any investment of residents' money is put behind it. I think something like that. Would members be comfortable with that as a recommendation from committee? I'll post that from chair. Okay, right, we've got enough on the voting. Right, thank you. Useful discussion. Thank you, everyone. I think that's about scrutiny doing its job effectively as well. So, with that, thank you, officers, for attending. I apologise we gave you a bit of a hard time, and your portfolio holder wasn't here to take some
take some of the questions, which might have been helpful. With that, I will close the meeting and thank members for their contribution this evening.